Yes.
Hey everyone, I'm Jo Holden. I'm an active conduit for source intelligence and I'm here to help the collective. So I've got a different kind of session today. For the past week, I've started putting some materials back out there in a revised, renewed, redeveloped sort of fashion. And they're all related to a number of topics. I'll be focusing more on how reality functions, reality as a very, very, very sophisticated simulation. And the purpose for me doing that is very much about wanting to explain and support people with different aspects of the reawakening process and the experiences that come with that, how they work, why they are happening, what's the purpose in terms of, how do we utilize these experiences, also changes that are happening on the planet, and strategies and solutions and challenges and obstacles that we're facing in terms of positive change is inevitable, it's happening. There is an ascension process playing out. At the same time, there are many deliberately designed mechanisms that are essentially working to slow and prevent and block and stop all of that kind of stuff. So in February of 2024, I've been following information provided by a person called Goguen. I had given a generous amount of trust and faith that that person was being honest. I have had some pretty surreal and extreme and profound experiences in my reawakening process, and I've explained in some of those sessions that I've been doing this past week how and why I came to trust and believe that Goguen was legitimate, was believable, was creditable. I was very much in support of Goguen. I actually found it very much a comfort to know that things were happening on such a high level, and those of us at what I perceived at the time grassroots that were just kind of in the thick of it with under the subjection of various systems, to know that someone and various agents and parties that were working with someone were simultaneously working to bring about positive change in the world. I saw it very much as those of us that are in the thick of it sort of rising up, and those that were working more from a top-down perspective, we'd meet in the middle somewhere. So I thought there was some commonality. I thought there was enough of what Kim had shared, what Kim had talked about, that was in alignment, compatible, let's say, with my own experiences and my own research and my own realizations, my own awakening awareness. And I come from a teaching background, and I feel like one of the major obstacles that we have on the planet at this time is that there's not enough support in terms of explanation and advice and resources that condense and compress what is huge amounts of information into palatable, logical, reasonable, sequential sort of formats where you kind of feel like there's stuff being thrown at you from every direction and you're trying to make sense of everything. And coming from a teaching background, also having gone through a number of different sort of esoteric experiences, also having done my own research, because those esoteric experiences gave me cause to want to go away and look things up and, you know, try and make sense of certain things. All of that combined, I felt like the most helpful thing I could do would be to provide people with the benefit of my hindsight, my wisdom, my learned experience, my, you know, the outcome, the result of everything I've invested in, and present it in such a way that it saves people a lot of time and energy and expense having to go away and piece it all together. It could just, you know, more, let's say, concisely summarize and get to the kind of crux of certain things. So I thought that would be helpful. I sent an earlier version of what I'm now re-recording, the first few sessions of reality as a simulation and a couple of sessions based on reawakening. I explained an out-of-body experience that I had, and that was kind of a turning point for me, where I started to more seriously and intentionally sort of dive down these various rabbit holes and whatnot. So I sent this info over to Kim Goguen and the UNN team, both, you know, separately. I know those materials were received. I know they were viewed, because the materials were on a YouTube channel that at the time, that was the only material that could have been seen, could have been viewed. It was all unlisted. It was never shared publicly, and they were the only people that I shared the link with. So I saw, you know, not many, but some views on there. So obviously some people were watching it in the background over there. Never got a real response from them in terms of any acknowledgement of the content, any thanks for the content. They did send me an email saying if I'd like to submit a field messenger report, I could. I'd sent them hours of content, so I was kind of, it's not really what I can summarize in a field messenger report, but okay. But what I have since experienced and witnessed is not only that content being used by Kim in her situation reports, or global intelligence agency reports as they're now retitled, not only using it and passing it off as her own content, which I've now had cause to do more research into Kim and who she is and that whole background, and I realised people have been speaking out for quite some time, telling people that she does that. I wasn't aware of that at the time that I sent the content over to her, so I, you know, it's dishonest. It's not great, but okay. I wouldn't have been too incentivized, motivated to say or do anything about it. I watched her take some segments of that content. It's kind of informed the last 14-15 months of her content, to be honest. And in the sessions I've been doing this past week, I have talked about it, because as we go through this session, I'll explain, you know, it's necessary. I do need to highlight what has been happening. But I've not only watched her use segments of the content and pass it off as her own, I've also watched her misuse, misrepresent, twist, distort, misinform, disinform people with it, which, you know, that's the opposite. My role as guided is to help people through sharing information that brings greater clarity and strength. You know, that's when I say I'm a conduit for source intelligence. I'm talking about recognizing who and what it is that actually guides and informs my existence and the reality that I experience, and consciously choosing to act in accordance, in alignment, in integrity with that. And anybody and everybody that does that is, of course, an active conduit for source intelligence. So I was more upset to see people being misinformed and disinformed with some of the content that I sent over. Again, it was enough to give me the nudge, the intuition, the guidance to move myself away from Kim and her content and that sort of collective of people. And I would have done that and leave it be and not said anything about what had happened, had it not been for the fact that during this period of time, within days of me sending that content, in fact, I've received some very vicious, energetic, psychic, spiritual attacks. And in the content that I sent last year, I didn't go into detail, but within one of the sessions I touched upon, I'd found myself the year prior to that on the wrong side of someone who I now know is involved in occult practices and is part of a group that you might call a coven, right? So my introduction to those types of practices came through some pretty nasty attacks that I'd received from that person, from that group. And it's kind of a good job that did happen, because it was a crash course, let's say. It gave me some grounding, it gave me some reason to research some aspects of... For years I've studied human energetics, and I've understood that individually and collectively, you know, we can work in groups, we can generate energy, we can utilize that energy and project it, you know, scientifically. If you look at research into use of prayer or transcendental meditation, you know, the Journal for Conflict Resolution, Greg Braden talks about this a lot, that it showed statistically, measurably, as groups of people, if you focus on certain things and you generate energy and project it towards, it does have measurable, verifiable effects in terms of changing. You know, it can heal people, it can bring about positive change in, let's say, you know, conflict, in terms of if it's like a war zone, there can be less casualties during the period where that energy is being focused in that area. Crime rates can go down. There's all sorts of things that I knew these things. I'd never really looked into the dark side of it. I'd never really understood why anybody would want to practice, you know, targeting people and doing the same things but in a harmful way, you know, like generating a lot of hateful energy, generating a lot of baneful, you know, wanting to bind people and block people and stop people and siphon from people, all of that kind of stuff. I was naively innocent for a long time about the reality of that, you know, just how prevalent that is. And I talk about this in a session that I did, which is an intro, but it's also a caution about Kim Goguen. So I've just realised I'm still on the first screen, so let me move along and introduce this session properly. That were a long ramble. Okay, so this session is titled Kim Goguen, Kim Stalker, Kimposter, Kimscammer, Kim, Stop It. And I'm going to explain. I know that seems a bit extreme. It's really not my style, but it needs to be said, and I'm going to explain as we go along, because I've already started telling you I had content stolen, I had content misused, content that I'd shared freely. You know, it wasn't like they stole it from my computer. I did send it over to them. Didn't expect, given who I thought she was and what I thought she was doing at the time, didn't expect things to pan out the way that they have. But as I've just been describing, since then, within days of me sending that content, I've been heavily attacked, viciously attacked, and what I was talking about, what had happened previously, I didn't think at the time I would ever say this, but we're 14, 15 months on. I'm actually glad that that other experience had happened, because here I am now, and had I not had that sort of crash course and been forced, if you like, to look into what these darker energetic practices are, which, as far as I'm concerned, there are many different types of magic. I will do some sessions on it because I've had to learn a lot about it. As far as I'm concerned, it's still all energy work. It's the manipulation of energy, but I hadn't understood just how robust the various methods and methodologies are, and, you know, the various approaches that can be taken and the various effects that can be created. And I'm certainly no expert, but I've learned a lot. And as a result of what had happened before, when I started receiving these pretty horrific attacks, and some have been worse than others, some of them, you know, I've got used to now, some of the sort of more everyday slash, it's something that these practitioners, they do have to keep putting their own energy into it. You know, it's like cleaning the house. If you clean the house, if someone else is trying to mess it up for you, as much as you clean, they have to keep putting their effort and energy into messing it back up, if that makes sense. So there's been this sort of tug of war thing going on, where there's been certain practices that have been done that they have stood out to me. Let's say they've been more extreme, and then there's been everyday stuff that it's just felt like someone putting crap through the letterbox kind of thing. You know, I've just had to kind of clean it up. But that's been going on. And then I don't even like saying this out loud because I feel like I sound crazy, but a few months after sending that content over to Kim and having all of these attacks and having the disappointment of realising that I'd been investing for a while in a person and a cause and a belief system that were all false, I had reason to believe that somehow, some way, I was being surveilled. Seems like a bit of an extreme term. I was somehow, some way being observed, being listened to. And that was because I started to see, even though I distanced myself from Kim, her content, you know, I'm not a subscriber of UNN anymore, don't listen to her broadcasts. The only time I have gone back and listened to broadcasts is when I've been cross-referencing certain things, because I now realise just how many times she's lied and contradicted herself, and, you know, that's a whole other thing. But I'm still a member of certain groups on various social media platforms, and things get posted, right? So I still see things from things that she's reporting on from her broadcast. So this information that's being shared online, I've been able to see on many occasions exactly what I've been having let's say, private, personal conversations with people about, and/or things I've been researching online if I've really got into a certain topic, subject, approach to something, certain media content, things I've been watching in a more entertainment sort of way. Kim's reports have weirdly, unbelievably mirrored, reflected whatever it is that I've been doing. And as you would, for a time, I kept dismissing it despite intuition picking up on it. It feels crazy to think that could be happening, because I don't think she is just a scam artist as in she's making everything up. I think she's a front for something. I've come to kind of realise, but it seems a bit much. It seems a bit extreme to kind of have this, ooh, maybe they're listening to me. I know in a general sense, electronically these days, anything and everyone is accessible, through electronic devices. I understand that. But the thought of someone actually eavesdropping on everything you say and do is weird and unsettling. It feels very intrusive. And so I didn't want to believe that could be happening. But more and more times, more and more occasions, more and more things, there were certain things that she explained in some of her reports. I saw transcripts that were shared on a social media chat, and it was literally almost word for word something that only days before I'd been having a conversation with someone about and explaining in exactly the same way, using exactly the same terminology. And there was, there were words in that. There's a vernacular that we use that is more authentically our own, like words that they're not typically what people would use to describe certain things. And I know this all sounds very vague. So the whole point of this session is to show you evidence that I now know Kim is 100% absolutely somehow, some way. And when I say Kim, I'm talking about not just herself, but whoever it is she's working with and she's working for. I have some theories about that, having done now more digging and putting certain pieces together. I've now got a bit more of an idea as to what I think is actually going on there. But I'm just going to show you. You guys can be the judge. Obviously, I feel vulnerable because I'm putting myself out there in a way that this is not me. I don't look for drama. I don't look for conflict. I would have happily moved on and had nothing more to do with Kim Goguen and or any of her content had I not felt attacked, stalked, stolen from, and had I not known 1000% that she's been deceitful with people, because I know that, because I know my content and I know she has disinformed people using that. So I know that she's not being honest with people. So without further ado, let's look at some evidence. So I want to bring your attention first of all to, this is a new YouTube channel that I've set up, and I'm just going to apologise now because we're already 24 minutes and some into this. This is it's going to be a long session because I want to lay this out, and I want people to be able to connect the dots and see for themselves. So it's not going to be flash in the pan sort of session. But I've spent the last 2 days putting this material together, questioning the whole time, do I really want to do this? You know, once you quote unquote expose people, it can get nasty, and I'll show more evidence further into this as to why I think that could be the case. But every single time, my guidance has been, I'm here to tell the truth in all its different forms as best I know it. Does it mean I know everything? No. Does it mean I'm always going to get it right? No. But providing I'm acting with integrity at the time, speaking my truth as best I know it, based on all of the available information, that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and this is part of that. So it's taken me slightly off path in terms of my momentum that I started to gather, but I'll get back on track with that. So new YouTube channel, because the content that I'd created, which I have linked, these videos that I'm showing you here, these are what I uploaded last week. In the first two that I'm pointing to, in the description of those, there are links to the content that I sent over to Kim last year. So anybody who comes to see this new content, if they want to go and check that out and just see for themselves what I'm talking about, what I'm covering in those sessions, and what shows up, from the end of February last year onwards, you will see not only does Kim embed a lot of it in her sessions, but you'll also see other UNN features, let's say. So Sunny interviews people and they're talking specifically about things that I've highlighted in those sessions as, significant, important. Why bring someone else in to talk about it when I've already shown that it's part of my content? But there's also evidence on the UNN community sort of forums, let's say, where they're sharing content from people I've referenced, people I've spoke about in that material. Joe Dispenza, Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, Nazim Haramein, all of these things, all heavily featured in my content. You'll see just after, within a few weeks, there's people on, like, part of the UNN team, like, oh, look at this is great, oh, look at that, that's great. Never once acknowledge, where the inspiration had come from. And it's, again, I could have just ignored that. The dishonesty of it is, pretty reflective of who and what they actually are. But what's happened since, and I'm not suggesting, just to be clear, I'm not suggesting that the UNN team themselves are involved in the darker side of it with, listening to people's content or listening to people's personal lives, or sending nasty sort of energetic attacks and or entities, which there's been some of that going on. I'm not suggesting those people on the front side of things who are on the chats and, I find it very hard to believe that Sunny would be involved in some sort of dark magic ritual kind of thing. I don't think it's that clear cut. I think Kim acts as a front for something, and she's bridging between some darker stuff in the background, and she's managed to attract enough of a team, enough support to present a more wholesome front. I think that's probably a better way to put it. So I've started this new channel. There are the 4 videos, as you can see, I've highlighted here, they're all unlisted. So again, we're in a situation, no one's had the links to these. I've not shared these with anyone. As far as the rest of the world is concerned, no one should know that these videos exist. I've showed the dates here. So I uploaded the first one, 20th of May, so that would have been, last Tuesday. These 2 on the 22nd of May, this one in the afternoon of Friday, May the 23rd. I'm highlighting that because it's important. There's a view here. That was me. I went on there. No one, as far as I know, remotely or otherwise, has viewed the content, as in on YouTube. Meaning, any knowledge that anyone might have of precisely what I'm talking about in these, they would have had to have been listening some other way or watching some other way, because they certainly haven't watched it through the YouTube platform. So in these sessions, as you can see, the intro and the caution about Kim Goguen, all the stuff I've just talked about, I unpack within that session. I talk about, realising I got it wrong when it came to Kim. I put way too much trust and faith in the realness of her information. So I've spent these past months, although yes, the attacks and feeling watched and surveilled has been a disruption, and it's been at times, to a certain degree, debilitating seems too much of a strong word, but it's been challenging. It's been difficult to kind of fight through some of the stuff. I have got stronger. I've learned a lot, and I have also recruited help in some respects. So, I'm saying that because I know, again, I'm gonna have been watched and listened to, so I'm just letting them know, I'm not in the same place that I was when this all started. Anybody can be big and tough and hard if they're attacking someone who's unsuspecting and hasn't got the skill sets to handle it, right? But as people grow and develop, then you're fighting a different opponent at that point. So, that's where we are now. But in that period of time, I've also been obviously revising what I'd originally been developing and delivering. A lot of topics, or certain topics, let's say, I was going to signpost to Kim. I wasn't going to explain it, or I felt she was more of an expert than myself, so it felt like the sensible and the right thing to do to just tell people, if you want to understand more about this, have a look at the UNN content. And you'll see, if you view the materials that I developed last year, I put a list together of, basically broke down a number of key sessions that she'd done that were accessible, that, if you look at this particular session, she talks about this and this session talks about this and this, thinking I was being helpful. So I've spent this past several months not just learning how to protect and kind of prepare and strengthen myself, but also figuring out how to sort of plug the gaps that was then left in my content, where I felt like what I was going to do was signpost people to Kim's content, and I'd been recommending it to people. It's like so embarrassing once you realise you've really got it wrong. I am going to do some sessions there to explain from the PSYOP sort of perspective, and just how and why it is so effective. I think a lot of people feel as if it's reflective of how, how they lack discernment, or how unintelligent they are, or these are all the things I kind of beat myself up with at the time. But now it's like, no, the design of those types of programs, let's say, that it's genius really, because what it is it's false light reflecting, they gather the information that other people genuinely are experiencing and genuinely are receiving downloads about, and then they present someone as being almost like the epitome of all of that, and then people gravitate to that because it's like, oh yeah, because that's what I've been experiencing, and that's the guidance I've been receiving, and that's what I feel like we're supposed to be moving towards. And it's all of that, and it's not just to attract people to then keep them, sort of caught up in this. And next week things are definitely going to change, or next week, it's hurry up and wait. Everything's happening. Just stay right where you are. Kind of once you see past that, it gets deeper and darker beyond that, because that's one aspect of it, that's surface level. Beyond that, who they're attracting in, there's a reason why you're attracted to that information. You are showing up. Your soul transmission is here to do important things. You need it, and they know that, and so you're being attracted to things that you think are reflective of who and what you are. Understandably, of course you would, because they're saying all the right things and they're using multiple techniques to create that effect of, yeah, I'm just like you. And at the same time, they're forming all sorts of binds and bonds, and at the same time they are providing you with deception. Well, they steal your truth. So all the stuff you're sharing, all the things, project ideas, comments on videos, comments in forums, materials that you want to share, all of that kind of stuff. And so, you're just feeding more and more of the representation of that false light back to yourself, and you keep seeing yourself in it. So this is me, this is where I'm meant to be, this is what I'm meant to be doing. And the whole time it's like a siphoning technique. And should you present yourself as someone who really does want to step up and step out in I feel like I've been kind of on this treadmill for long enough, it's the hamster wheel, and I feel like there's ideas that I've got, and I've got the motivation, and I really want to start to bring actual genuine positive change to the world. You let that be known, and you've just put a huge target on yourself, and they're using those programs as a net to draw all of those people in, and in various ways and using various methods. They're creating binds and contracts and attaching sigils and seals, and the work is being done. Don't get it twisted. The work is being done to ensure, one, you stay fixated on those programs, and two, you keep giving your energy to those programs, and three, as a means through which people can be then monitored to ensure, if you get ideas to perhaps step up and step out, you can be knocked back in that box as quickly as you need to be, and or the legs knocked out from under you. And I know that all sounds very paranoid and cynical, but I've experienced it. And my experience with Kim, I'm going to be in this session talking about this past 14-15 months, where it's become consciously in my face, present. Prior to that, there are other sessions I will do, and I'll talk about in the run-up to that. came across Kim's content all the way back in sort of early 2021. And I was involved in assemblies. I had a friend who was involved in the Global Health and Wellness Consortium and worked very closely with Lisa Thomas. There's a whole background to this. There's a lot of things that at the time, in my twisted, distorted, spellbound, let's say, perception, I explained so many things away that now I've got the clarity that I have. I look back at and I can't quite believe I was so quick to overlook and dismiss and ignore very obvious red flags. And I will explain that in some upcoming sessions, but for now I just want to talk about this content that I created. This was last week, so you can see the dates. The latest one being May the 23rd, 2025. That is UK time zone, so it was afternoon my time. If I need to, I can share timestamps as to when it was completed on my computer. It was uploaded straight away. I'm saying all of this because we're going to get into what Kim's session on what was the 23rd of May to her, which was the 24th of May UK time, because we're a few hours in front. So by the time she recorded it and it got uploaded to the UNN platform, it was around 1 in the morning when she's, the notification told people it was being recorded. It was about 20 to 4 in the morning of the 24th of Saturday the 24th, so several hours after the sessions that I did. So in that introductory session, I talk about reasons to be careful, to be cautious of what is going on with Kim Goguen and the people that she works with, or the people that she's working with behind the scenes, let's say, because I could be wrong, but I find it hard to believe that the people that are involved with UNN fronts for these things. I think there's innocent people involved. But okay, so one of the sessions, this is the one that I did on the 22nd of May 2025. Title of it is God, Source, Creator and Sovereignty. There's a lot of things that I cover in that, but in the latter half, let's say 37 minutes, 20 seconds ish onwards, I'm talking about God's plan for the organic system. So what I'm talking about the purpose of reality, essentially. And I've circled here, as you can see, these flip charts behind me. I'm talking about God, Source, Creator, all different terms for the same entity, the same intelligence. But to me, when we talk about God, we're talking about the generator of the organic design, as in reality functioning as a very, very, very sophisticated simulation through which God, Source, Creator experiences self in a multitude of different forms, including us as human beings, as many other types of beings, as all different life forms. That was the original design. God wanting to, in his original state, he was whole, he was perfect, he was one, and he wanted to experience and express different aspects of self in different circumstances and conditions, in different environments, having capacity and capability and access to different types of functionality. Let's say, that's where it ties into the densities. It's what you're capable of doing. The lower the density, the less available. The higher the density, the more possibility and potential that is available to you. So I'm talking about that, God's original plan for what he designed in its original organic state. Source being God, but the source of the supply of power, projection of the organic world that's expressing reality, coding, as in the data, the information that brings everything into form and instructs and inspires the function of everything, that coding being what we call ultimate truth. So source coding is the highest level of truth available. The further away from that you get, as in the more distorted it becomes, the less truthful it is. So coding, as you can see behind, my head there, I am talking about it as a transference of resources. So it's a representation of source that is ubiquitously everywhere all the time, transmitting heterogeneously. That's a TRUTH. So heterogeneously, we're talking about in all different forms, so it's a transference of resources. You've got your power that's projecting it, and then your coding combined, and what that gives you is what we know as light. Light is the originator of all that is, in terms of from the plan, the design, through to the construction. Light is the mechanism that brings the power source and the instructive element, the coding, the truth, to bring things into being. And from that, it creates, it becomes a system, because there is instruction, so it follows certain systematic principles. And as you can see on the flip chart behind me, I explain what that is. It's the goodness system, God's original organic design, navigation, empowerment, support system, and it's generative, meaning it grows, it evolves, it naturally enhances what resources are available through the integrations of vital and voluminous experiences. So it's all, connected. And in that description, where I've stopped it here is I stopped it to show where I start talking about this stuff in a more connected way, because at first I'm just laying stuff out. So when it comes to the organic and the natural, as this moves on, as that session moves on, I talk about the organic being the original resources that God assigned for the natural integration of the construct and the character, meaning any world that you incarnate into, God has already got a covenant with any aspect of himself that is incarnating into a world. He has already agreed whatever you need while you're there, as you are me and I created it, you can have whatever you want, providing it's in assistance of the life. So we'll get to that with the natural. So it's not about just having whatever you want in a distorted, inverted, inorganic, artificial way, out of greed, out of self-satisfaction. It's about for you to show up and experience and express yourself as the organic version of yourself, which is what I have created you for and inspired you to be and do. Of course, anything that you need in assistance of that, it's my freaking system. It's my world. I created it. You can have what you want from it. That's the truth, when you get to the truth of it. The natural, therefore, if the organic is the original resources God assigned for the natural integration of the construct and the character, meaning the viability of your life while you're there, then the natural would be the nervations, meaning that original covenant transfers from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. A nervation is an exchange of contract. The nervations assigned in trust for the utilization of resources in assistance of the life, which is everything I just talked about. So I explain all this. As you can see, it's an hour-long session, so there's a lot that I cover, but I'm explaining all of that in the sense that if you can understand that, you can understand why the current quote-unquote control systems on this planet do not align with, they do not reflect what the organic, natural, God-assigned function of not just this world, but any world is supposed to be. this is going to become more relevant as we move along. So that's, stuff I'm covering in that session. That was on the 22nd of May. So 23rd of May, here's a quick clip. So it's only a couple minutes long, I think. Where human beings come into this, at our very basic level, we should, if we were highly aligned with organic soul transmission, at least have self-awareness and exercise choice, which I think most people would say they are self-aware because they're aware of their person, they know they exist, and they make choices all the time to do whatever it is that they want to do. I would argue self-awareness is really more about awareness of truth and who and what we truly are. I am more spiritually guided and inclined there, so there is a debate you can have around what actually fully constitutes self-awareness versus self-ignorance, for instance, and whether people really are utilising choice or whether they're being subjected to norms and programming from the environment telling them who to be and how to be and what's right and what's real. And so personally, I feel like the vast majority of humans on this planet at this time are operating more from this density. I don't say that to be derogatory or to be unkind or judgmental. What I observe is most people, on the one hand, arguing that they do exactly what they want to do, and on the other hand, telling me all the reasons why they have to do this and they have to do that. And so there's some cognitive dissonance in terms of what appears to be real and true to people. And when we do the holographic session, we'll talk about agency more from the perspective of the objective reality versus the subjective reality, because that's where a lot of these programs do run. Whether what is supposed to happen is the organic programs are supposed to run most of what we experience. The only time really these are not source designed, just to be clear. The only time we're really supposed to experience a negative state or reaction is supposed to be to let us know this is not what you are, this is not what I am. This is not the I am, this is the I am not. But the mechanism within the design of the system is what has been exploited. It's what has been, let's say, amplified to the point where people now typically, in this world at least, at present will argue that negativity is the norm, but because it's become so normalized, they don't see it as negative, they just see it as realistic. It's what this world is, it's what this world does, it's how this world functions, and it is what it is, and you've just got to accept it. And I do realise, so I
let me say this, because when
that
I did the
in
session,
half, because there is another segment to that I want to show you. Initially I was going to cut it off there, and then I realised what I said next was also quite important to what we're going to look at coming up. So I'll play it now because again it's only a couple of minutes long. This is, these two clips combined is like 5 minutes or so of the session. It's an hour 44-minute session, so you can imagine I cover quite a lot of stuff in it. But when we come to look at what Kim's session was about, just a number of hours later, you'll see why this is relevant. So I'll just play this next clip and then we'll move on to the next part.
Yesterday, the sovereignty session, I
I do realise sometimes the way I personally express my beliefs can come across as if I think everything can just change overnight and it's easy and the solutions immediately available for everything. That's not what I believe. As we go through these sessions, and especially when we get to strategies and solutions, I do have a much more level-headed perception of how careful we have to be to ensure that we don't disrupt things to the point where people suffer as a result of not having access to resources, for instance, or not certain systems collapsing. We don't want that. But when we get into those sessions, what I will show is evidence that there are already solutions available that are just being suppressed or denied or ignored, or there are things that can already be integrated to the systems as they operate that will just help people access what is already rightfully theirs more efficiently with immediate effect. Now, again, myself, I'm not going to be the one person on the planet that's going to be able to convince pre-established fraudulent inverted systems to just give it up, just change. It's going to take many people calling for that, but doing so from a place of knowing the truth of who and what they are, and they have every right to request that, so that to me is where the self-awareness comes into it. So
okay, so I'm realising I didn't fully read this out, so I'm just trying to give you an idea of what I covered in summary in those sessions that I recorded, 22nd and the 23rd. So in addition to talking about what the original design and plan for the creation, when I talk about reality, I'm talking about the overarching operating system of the entire universe, multiverse, however you want to think about it. I'm not talking about any derivative system that someone claims to be controlling or, that might exist. Or, the system Kim claims to have, I now know doesn't exist. Do I think she's got access to certain systems? Yes, I think probably through being an asset of some kind to some or perhaps multiple intelligence services. But I think more than anything, when Kim talks about the system, I think she's actually talking about her person. The more I've looked at the contradiction in certain things that she said and certain claims that she's made, I think she's talking about the fact that we're all essentially quantum devices, mapping systems. I think that's what she means when she talks about the Global Intelligence Agency. I think that's all of us. I think we're all the Global Intelligence Agency. I think it's what when she's talking about the DNA connection to the financial system. I'm going to play you a clip later from my content. If you understand that, you understand what she's talking about in terms of having our living DNA attached to the creation of the currency, which, funnily enough, just hours later after me uploading that second session, a day or so later after me uploading this first session, it's funny that she decided she ought to revisit that and talk about that some more. But let's see first, what else was I looking at and listening to? Given what I've just described, was the content of my session or sessions, what was the focus? I've been revisiting, let's say, different sources of information to bring together
playlist so that I can share with people recommended resources. So I can show people, you know, this is not just me spouting stuff. Here's where I got this from, here's where I got that from, here's examples of this, you know, so supportive material so people have got more things to look at. So let's have a look at this. So Monday, the 19th of May, 2025, I've started doing this, taking screenshots, so I've got digital records, so I've got dates and timestamps because of what I've told you. There's been so many times now where exactly what I've listened to or exactly what I've spoke about has found its way into Kim's content, and it's not like, oh, just kind of a general theme. It's like, that is literally what that person I've just been listening to said, or that is literally what I've just said to whoever I've just been talking to. It's weird, it's creepy in fact, but okay. So Monday the 19th of May, this is a video on YouTube. It's going to be on the recommended resources playlist attached to this session. How one company secretly poisoned the planet. It's from a channel called Veritasium. They're very popular. They've got millions of followers. It's a great video. It's, you know, it's sort of documentary style. What it's talking about is Teflon, the history of it, and now the many different variations of it that's found its way into not just what we think about in terms of non-stick pans and stuff, but it's because of the properties. It explains like the molecular qualities of it. It's water resistant, so it's in this clothing. It's fire resistant, so that, you know, fire extinguishers, etc. There's all sorts of uses and applications that you wouldn't even imagine it being utilized for. And in this, one of the people that have put this documentary style video together, they go and get the blood tested, because one of the experts that's been speaking out against it has said, you know, you wouldn't believe, like pretty much as it says in the title, most of the planet now have some of this in some capacity to some level in the bloodstream. It's that, you know, invasive and pervasive, and it's that difficult to filter out of, you know, it's in the water supply, it's this, it's that. So it's an interesting thing, and they do, you know, they explain that there are ways that you can kind of sort of combat or safeguard how much of it finds its way into your system. But at the same time, they're also, you know, highlighting that there's an average these days. It's so common, unless you live in a tribe in, you know, some native sort of away from any and all developed aspects of reality, that pretty much everybody's going to have some in the bloodstream. So that being the case, you know, the kind of, don't know if you'd call it reassuring, but kind of like, you know, now we just expect that people will have some of this. So that's what I watched and listened to Monday the 19th of May. I revisited some materials around Jacques Fresco, because what I said in that first clip, or one of the clips, I'm trying to remember it. Anyway, when I said about, you know, yeah, there are solutions that are being suppressed, but in the strategies and solutions, we'll look at, you know, what's already available, what's already being proven that could be implemented with more immediate effect if enough people either chose to themselves access to source these types of inventions and or technologies and or utilize these various methods. Like, there's certain things that are available that we just, many of us don't know about or don't use. We don't choose to exercise our own organic will to use them because it's more convenient not to. So there's some of that. But Jacques Fresco he was
very popular as a result of Zeitgeist years ago. You know, Peter Joseph did the Zeitgeist films, and his background as an engineer, you know, he's called a futurist, is very clued up on what he called the resource-based economy. So how to best utilize technology on the one hand with natural organic systems and resources symbiotically, so have them working together instead of against each other, where a lot of technologies cause harm and disruption and destruction and decay and deterioration. Rather than that, you know, you can have them working together. So I was looking back at some of his materials online, and I thought, let me just take a screenshot. So I know so many things that I look at and I listen to and stuff, it keeps finding its way into Kim's content, so let me just keep a record of that. So I did. That was Tuesday. Also, also on Tuesday, a short video that I listened to about Palantir. I think that's how you say it, Palantir, whichever. Selected $90 million 5-year contract for, you know, some vehicles for, I think, military, but in that they're talking about how Palantir essentially is very much in bed with big government, big corporations, like your Black Ops sort of stuff, helping with weapons, helping with surveillance, helping with data capture, all of that kind of stuff, which you know, they're making a lot of money doing it, at the same time not helping the planet, not helping people. So in terms of challenges and obstacles, I've been looking at that. I know there's a whistleblower that's come out and talked about the ethos of the company being very might is right sort of thing. So just as a reference, I'd put that on one of the playlists as like a discussion point or as an example. So Thursday, Richard Werner, I reference him. I talk about him in that first session, the God, Source, Creator, Sovereignty. He has, you know, he's an economist, he's very well known. He's the guy that designed quantitative easing as a solution to when the banks were failing, which I know a lot of us on an everyday level were not fans of that policy, but he does explain not only how money is created honestly, truthfully, and it's incredibly encouraging to know that someone that operates at the level that he does is actually telling the truth about it, because he's the guy that revealed, despite people claiming it's fractional reserve and despite people claiming it's it's deposits that are loaned out, he was the one that showed, no, it's actually as people request it, when they sign for it, that sign of nature is what creates the currency. So that's where the money comes into being. We're just not told that that's how it comes into being. So we unlawfully, if you're looking at it from a natural law perspective, converted into debtors because we're told that we owe that money back. But in actual fact, it's us requesting it that allowed it to be created. So I linked a video in the recommended resources from that first session explaining about that, him explaining it for himself. But what he also talks about is how what we taught about inflation is it's a hoax, con, inversion, it's false, it's a fallacy, because obviously we're all told if there's too much money, prices will inflate, money's going to be worth nothing, then we're all going to be in trouble. He's the guy that said, no, listen, that same principle and the same policy that we used to bail out the banks, that quantitative easing, we could utilise that in a multitude of ways, and what we ought to be doing is giving huge amounts of cash, or let's say allowing the creation of large amounts of cash through the demand at a more local level to drive productivity, so people can set up businesses and people can live comfortably and create, or so that people can invent things, so that people can invest in things. It's on a more local level. It's almost like, if you really think about it, having project funding, isn't it? It's almost like people promising that funds could and will at some point be coming out to people, so people can actually pursue their passions and aspirations. It's a little bit like that. Only he is an economist and he has got genuine expertise in the sector, and I highly suspect certain people who, is being named enough already in this video, has taken a lot from his playbook in terms of what they present for how we should be moving forward. I think actually it's already been taught and shown that the solutions exist for what could change how reality functions and who has access to what. There's certain people out there pretending to be working at higher levels and acting as experts, and what they're actually doing is misinforming and distorting the information, not because they don't understand it, because they do understand it, and they'd much rather have people hanging on to their every word, waiting for something that's never going to happen. But I digress. Let's move on. So these are things that I was looking at, listening to, bringing together, pulling together in accompaniment, in support of the sessions that I'd been recording earlier throughout the week, let's say Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Yeah. So this is important. So right over here, so this was Friday evening after I'd done that second session. The title of this video, "The Debt Can't Be Repaid, so what will happen instead?" That's basically talking about what I've just been saying. It ties into Richard Werner's argument that what should happen is the same sort of principle of that quantitative easing that happened to bail out the banks should happen to ensure that people at a local level who are the supply of the currency in the first place through their request for it, and or other agents acting on our behalf requesting it, so a government's asking for money for us but claiming it on our behalf, or other institutions, other agencies that ask for that money to be printed, and they will have bills and trusts and whatnot that we named in, we're all beneficiaries of, but we have no trusteeship, we have no control of how they actually function, who gets what from them. We're essentially just there to be identified as someone that should be receiving something from it. Whether it ever finds its way to us or not is another matter, right? So that video kind of talks about that as well, and how essentially your big corporations and your big by big corporations I'm talking about also governments as corporations and whatnot, their debts will be forgiven, but this notion of a jubilee at any point for any of us, never going to happen. So I'm paraphrasing, that's not exactly how he says it, but so he's talking about that. He's talking more specifically with regards to the US national debt, but it's a global sort of model, as we know. So this Brian O'Leary, this is an interview, as you can see, from 2009. I love Brian O'Leary.
I bought his book, The Energy Solution Revolution, years ago. I've done other sessions where I've talked about his ideas and his ethos and the work that he did as a younger man. For anybody that doesn't know Brian O'Leary, he is a physicist. He was on the NASA program. He worked for NASA on the astronaut program, I should say. Then he taught at Princeton for a while. He was a colleague of Carl Sagan's, but a very genuine, organic sort of being, very heartfelt, cared about humanity, cared about the planet. The various sort of special access projects and whatnot for a period of time tried to recruit him into certain things, and because they were more weapons based and he wasn't having any of it. He had friends and close colleagues who were assassinated, some due to involvement in stuff, some due to not agreeing to get involved in things. His life came under threat, so he fled the US, he moved country, he moved to a different country, and tried to pursue similar kind of stuff to the Jacques Fresco, the Venus Project, like how do we harmonise what we've developed technologically with what the natural organic world is and has and how it functions. How do we ensure that there is a harmonious balance so we're not causing harm. So in that interview, I went back to it, and this was Friday evening, couple of hours maybe, about 10 o'clock my time when I started listening to this, so maybe 3 hours before Kim Goguen starts recording her update. And in the interview, Brian O'Leary is talking to Kerry Cassidy. He's talking about, these assassination attempts, or like some of his friends who actually were, they died under very suspicious circumstances, let's say that. Also, some of them, if they weren't physically, transitioned, the labs were raided, stuff was seized, there were, some got financially blacklisted, sort of reputational assassinations, as in having people, depicted and kind of projected to be, like quacks, crackpots, how we're trying to say both of those at the same time there. You know what I'm saying? Just, it's the court of public opinion, right? It's how people perceive someone, and however the media and the authorities present it, a lot of people will accept that and believe that. So these are the things I was looking at, as you can see here, and listening to, which I listened to that entire interview, is an hour or so, maybe a little bit longer. As you can see here, I then went on to download for myself, essentially borrow that book and another one that Brian O'Leary in that interview recommended, that was this here, is a screenshot from Friday the 23rd of May, so that same evening, from the homepage of Wade Fraser, who he compiled many resources that were all to do with suppressed cures, suppressed inventions, the testimonies of people who'd been harassed and targeted, and that kind of stuff. So I didn't know if that, given how old this interview with Brian O'Leary was, I didn't know if that webpage would still be there. It's ahealedplanet.net. When I went to check, it is still there, resources are still there. It's a good resource in and of itself, for the compilation, the collation of all that information. So I took a screenshot of that. These books here, Re-inheriting the Earth, that's what I've circled there. So that from Brian O'Leary's interview, he was showing that. So I've got his
Energy Solution Revolution book, but I'd not got that one. So I went on Amazon. I was going to get it off there, and I thought, let me just have a look on the Internet Archive, see if it's available, which it is. So you can see here I've emailed it across to myself, the link for it. And then also one of the references that he gives in that interview, one of the other authors that wrote a book on suppressed inventions, that's what you can see there. So these are all the things I've been researching. I've been sending, links to myself so that I can collate these, so that I can share these with people. Started putting stuff on the recommended resources playlist. And here, if we move on, we can see that this is where the GIA report is currently being recorded. As you can see, my time, that's May the 24th. And it's just after 1 in the morning. And then you can see here the Global Intelligence Agency statement, which is this report there. That gets uploaded at 20 to 4 in the morning. So several hours after that stuff that I've just been looking at, listening to, and many hours and days after, in some, depending which video we're talking about, the content that I created. Now, I'm being a little bit facetious, but I do not have incredible powers of precognition. I'm not capable of seeing into the future and knowing exactly what people are going to talk about. I'm not capable of that. So let's have a look at what Kim's report from the 23rd of May 2025 is all about. And as I've put here, recorded and posted UK time, 24th of May. So I'm just going to read some of it out to you. So it's 23rd of May 2025. Coming up on today's Global Intelligence Agency report. Today we are going to discuss the corporate breakdown of the deep state, where we stand and what you can do to prepare. Despite thousands of people working for them, they still can't seem to keep their eye on all the balls. That's us, all the balls, by the way. This is their weakness and our greatest asset. Now, I've highlighted the hour because I'm so glad to know she's on our side, because I thought the lying and the stealing and the attacks and the unlawful surveillance, I thought that might mean that she's not on our side, but thankfully she's clarified she is. So good news, Kim's on our side. All right, so we have had some interesting developments this week. So we figured out a pathway forward and how to keep people safe. Why would we need to keep people safe, Kim? Please do tell. Has it anything to do with assassinations that happen when technologies are being invented and developed and the need to suppress them? Let's see if it's got anything to do with that. This has been one of my biggest concerns. I'm sure it has. What is the deep state going to do? How is that going to affect us and our businesses and our projects as we move forward? Because, let's just say we actually did have a humanitarian form of quantitative easing that would actually allow us to actually do something. And don't get me wrong, there are solutions that exist. So please don't take this as me telling people we're all screwed, because we're absolutely not. We just need to realise all of the different tricks that they're using to keep us stuck in the same position. But anyway, so let's see how it's going to affect us all. Things work at exactly the right time. That's how Source works, because Kim would know, because she works so closely with Source. She knows these things. And this is one of those things. So let's see. The way forward was presented. Underlined. Yeah, it was presented, Kim. It was presented in the content that I privately created, that somehow, someway, you've created your entire situation report around. It wasn't presented to you, Kim, but somehow, some way, you've had access to it, and we'll just see just how closely you've had access to it.
So the way forward was presented, and we've been diligently working for days now. Interesting that you use that term, days. I thought she'd been diligently working for years at this point, has she not? She's got the highest level of clearance of anyone that's ever existed on this planet. So the fact that, at exactly the right time, she's just realised what the way forward is for us all. So what could that be? Now that she's got it figured out, she has, they have. It's not come from anybody else, obviously. Okay. So they've been diligently working for days, ensuring we carry out the plan. I'm sure that's got nothing to do with what I presented as God's original organic design, that plan for how reality is actually meant to function, without anybody needing to bring a fictional, invented system into the mix that somehow, some way is being claimed to be the one creating all the changes, despite the fact that we're each and all a representation and expression of Source, and therefore anything and everything that gets agreed to by Source on this planet, those agreements are coming through us. We each and all are deciding what Source agrees to by us agreeing or not agreeing to them. So yeah, let's bear that in mind. We have worked out why things always seem to work out for the deep state. So in this past week, she's figured out how it is that the inorganic representation of God's design seems to be getting fed more and more and more. She's just this week now figured out how the deep state always seem to get things to work out for them. It could be that the systems themselves are designed to feed that system, that way of being. Could be that. Let's see. And interesting, I've put those question marks because we've worked out why things always seem to work out for the deep state. If you look at any of Kim's reports, they literally introduce 3 times a week, every week. The deep state tried this, and this is how they failed. The deep state fell into our trap again. Oh, the deep state tried to do that, but we're 15 steps ahead because obviously Kim's the one that knows all the plans. She's got all the plans. She's had all the plans for years, according to her. So how and why now she's just figured out the plan is fascinating to me. But the fact that there's been such a switch into the deep state always failed to that everything always seems to work out for the deep state. So, okay, let's see, what did Kim's light bulb moment look like? So she figured out that there were systems in place that would govern systems. She doesn't mean AI systems, she means systems of governance. Okay, we've all known that all along. You can ask a 10-year-old if they think there's systems of governance on the planet, they're going to tell you yes. They know that there are authorities, they know that there are systems that... Are you not the one that sat in meetings with Marduk and Enki and Enlil? Did you not meet with Putin? Were you not flying around the world trying to get gold out of vaults to solve the economy? Were that not you, Kim? Like, have you... How is this only just somehow sunk in that there are systems that exist? Yeah, there are. And they are reflective of the inversion of who and what God Source Creator is. We are each and all designed to be a representation of the I am, of what is. The systems function on the very basis, the very principle of having us agree that that's not true. And that's how we forfeit any right, any authority, any access to anything that would actually allow us to live our lives in alignment with our true source essence. It's not rocket science, it's very simple. And I sent you content above a year ago that explained that.
And now I'm trying to explain it to people and leave you to do whatever it is you're doing, and you're still trying to interfere. You're still trying to take my content and misrepresent it to people as if, one, it's yours, and two, you miss out all the key points that would actually empower anyone. You miss out all of the points that would actually give people a sense of, rather than just sitting here waiting for you to tell me when things are going to change, I'm actually going to make some decisions for myself and do something. And that's the design of what it is that Kim is doing. But let's continue. Let's see what this new plan and the way forward that's been presented. Let's see what else comes up in it. So she talks about how dark energy feeds dark ages and timelines, and I've put there, explained in my content in a practical, functional context so people can actually understand. It's literally a mechanism. It's literally part of, if you understand how quantum computing works, and I haven't actually gone into it to that level of detail. I've explained the overview of it. We'll get to that within a session or two. It's really simple, but okay. So she explains about that. We've talked about moving into a golden age and what that means. We discovered this week that the systems don't really understand golden age protocols. The old AI systems want to keep enforcing the old systems and the old ways of being. Imagine that. Imagine the very systems that developed and evolved as a result of people living in states of deception, which is, I am not source, I'm not a representation of God source creator, I therefore do not have to live in alignment with being life supportive and giving power to and helping and being constructive and being creative and being adventurous and being a problem solver. Instead of doing all of that, because that's all source stuff, I don't have to do any of that. What I can just do instead is get other people to do that and then just feed off of them. That is literally what has created all of the systems that we now live in. So Kim, having for years now sat in that very high seat on that very high pedestal, has just realised that the old AI systems want to keep enforcing the I am not programs, what I refer to as the I am not. So it's the opposite, it's the inversion of what God source creator is. And if you look at my content, if you listen to it, I lay it all out so it makes a lot of sense as to how and why it would be the case that, one, there would be the choice between the two, and two, why we're in systems that are parasitic and poisonous and venomous and verminous, because people have chose instead to choose not to align with God source creator. So they're not receiving the projection of the organic will, which is the power source, and then they need a power source. So where do they turn? To the very people who are showing up for the most part in the best way they know how to be a representation of the projection of the organic will, who are generating that energy source as a result of the light that is transmitting, power, and the coding, the source coding combined is what we know is light. So the people that are generating and emitting and transmitting that, the very people who don't want to align with it want to take it from them. And Kim should know about that, because it's how she has been able to sustain this imitation and deception of being this false light figure, this representative of the light on the planet, for as long as she has. The very fact that she's even talking in terms of
only just figuring any of this out is proof enough that she is not who she says she is. There is no way that any higher council of any kind or protection unit would be working with someone who hadn't, at the very least, got the basic grasp of why the planet functions the way it does, where we're at, what caused it. So, and on that note, before anybody says, but all of the history and the special DNA, I can do some sessions and I'll break all of that down. Her backstory, she's taken most of it from the blog that Shane Sador did. At the time, he was going by the name Shane Bales. It was called the Ruiner blog. Now I've looked at that. I didn't know about that until I've started doing research since. Now I've looked at that. Her entire, this is how in the know I am, she took it from his blog. She's literally posted things. Someone only the other day on one of the chats posted a screenshot of a statement that Kim put out in 2021. Now I've seen that blog. It was almost word for word what he had said. You know, it was all, you know, the only way to win is not play the game. Literally from his blog. The whole structure, the Draco and the parents and the covens and all of that from his blog. He laid all that out. He came from a background on both sides of his family where there were what you might call, he uses the term Illuminati families because he says, you know, they will allow him to use that term because it's not how they refer to themselves, but they're quite happy for everybody in the public to know them as that. They don't really give a crap because at this stage they don't feel concerned about people learning about that sort of stuff because they don't feel like there are enough people who have the wherewithal and the commitment and the dedication and the strength of spirit to actually want to challenge any of the agendas. We've come so far now, they, for the most part, think they've got it in the bag. Now, I disagree. I know a lot of people, at least who I've come across online, who I believe to be genuine and authentic. I know they don't believe they've got it in the bag. I know now that I've engaged with his content, I know he doesn't think they've got it in the bag. At the same time, the more people fall for the deceptions and the promises of someone else is going to fix stuff in some kind of way or improve things for us in some kind of way, the more that happens, the more likely we are to experience delays. You know, there's still, in terms of timelines, how things can play out, is the transition into a higher frequency range of being going to happen no matter what? Yes, because the God source creator, through various systems, cosmologically, astrally speaking, is ensuring that there is enough light to essentially force that into being, but do so at a gradual enough pace that it gives any and every entity on the planet time to acclimatize, time to wake up in a, let's say, more comfortable fashion, rather than being woken up with a bucket of cold water in the face, being coaxed to get up with a cup of tea and a slice of toast. You know, it's more pleasant, right? So naturally speaking, gradually the light frequencies that are emitting and transmitting onto this planet, it's waking people up. It's going to happen. We ourselves are God source creator presenting selves, and we can generate more light on this planet. In fact, some of the science I'm going to show you, and it comes from Jack Cruiser's work,
He breaks it down. We ourselves, within our person, utilizing the right conditions, we can generate light that is in frequency ranges that exceeds the spectrum that the sun provides. Now, we of course need to utilize that generation of light with the will in a meaningful fashion. We have to have focus, and it would really help if we all could get on the same page with certain things, so we could actually create targeted change, rather than everything just feeling like, you know, we're all just kind of bouncing around, not knowing what best to focus time and energy on, you know. So that to me is one of the reasons why I want to do what I want to do, because I want to try to find a means through which I can put my message out and see who gravitates towards it, so that there can at some point be a community that we can actually focus on the doing rather than just the talking, rather than just the explaining, like the actual doing things. That's what I want to get to. But I keep trying to find the groups that are the right fit, the right people. And I thought, you know, for a time, that's what the Kim Goguen thing with the assemblies, that's the reason I invested so much, because I was like, this is, people are doing things, this is great. And as we know, that all kind of got shut down, because I don't think it was ever meant to go anywhere. You know, that's a whole other discussion that we could have anyway. So, okay. So that was Kim's intro. Let me just pause it. Let me explain. Right, so that was Kim's intro. So now this clip, if I remember correctly, this is me, first segment, talking about the casualization of what we would refer to as evil, which is everything that violates and interferes with life. That's what's been normalized. And so that being the antipodal, equal opposite to the causal. So the causal is the organic will that is expressing and making decisions to take action on things. You know, the will is what drives us. It's we can have a thought, we can feel a certain kind of way about it. Until we decide to do something, the body does nothing, right? So we need that organic will. That's the causal. That, from a coding perspective, that's when things get sort of shifted into, this is happening, this is going to make its way into the physical material reality. Whereas the casual, which is the antipodal, it's the anti-source, if you like, it's the inorganic, unnatural equivalent of that, is the state, it's the plane of existence whereby we disengage our organic will. We decide, you know, nothing's got any meaning. What difference does it make? Why should I try? And therefore, suffering and struggle and people, you know, being depleted and going without gets not necessarily overlooked, but shrugged off in the sense of like, well, what can we do? This is just how it is, you know, and this is the world that we live in. So I'm sort of talking about that. I'm also talking about the artificial, because Kim has taken pretty much all of the key concepts of what I've talked about in these sessions, but presented them in a distorted way, where she's telling people that there's been some AI system that's been causing all this. You know, it's not come through us, it's not come through any other beings or entities that have used their you know, life source energy to distort and invert and create these evil systems and circumstances. It's none of that. It's just an AI system somewhere that's been pumping all this stuff out. So I just want to share a clip where I'm explaining how it evolves over time, and it is something that those programs are a reflection, they are a representation of what happens when we're in a state of denial as to the truth of who and what we are, when we refuse to show up as conduits for and expressions of the organic will, which is the I am, which is source energy, source coding, that's instructing and informing and inspiring the reality around us. When we switch off from that, there's think of it a little bit like a lever, you know, there's a shift that happens, and the energy flows into the I am not programming. And the more that happens, the more beings doing that, the more often that happens, the more powerfully we access the I am not versus the I am. The longer we sustain it, the more it feeds it, and it grows, which is why we're at the state that we're at. It's why this world functions as it does right now. But it can change, because it changes with us. It changes every time we shift into a different state. Okay, so let me just play this clip. We've got causal here. It's not a spelling mistake that I've put casual there. So each of these is supposed to be antipodal, you know, like equal opposites. So casual, we think of it now typically when we use the word every day, it's like laid back. No, you know, not too formal, it's not too important. And as it states here, no meaning. No, you know, it's harmful in the sense that it casualizes things that are harmful. So think of it more in terms of casualty. You know, if there's a casualty, you can pass it off, and maybe sometimes, you know, accidents happen, you can pass it off as, you know, there's no rhyme or reason to it, there's no one to point the finger at, there's no one to blame, it just is, it's just how life is. So that's where the causal is us invested, us participating in the process of creation. The casual is basically you don't have that power, you're not able to do that. There's no real meaning to anything, everything's random. And then the harms that can then be caused as a result of that. So let me just explain these as well, because I talked about consciousness, will, and essence. I didn't talk about these. So deterioration, you know, it's pretty self-explanatory. When you're taking power from something, if it's a live system, it's going to suffer as a result of not having the optimal power source provided. So there's going to be, you know, whether it's decay, there's going to be an inferior version of it that is manifesting. That can happen over time, or it can happen pretty rapidly, dependent upon how much energy you've taken from it, because the energy is data in transit. All energy is light and or a derivative effect of light. So take that away, it's losing its source code and it's going to decay or deteriorate in some way. There you end up with an artificial version of it, and or within the construct, those of us with agency can create from what source has provided something that is antipodal, is the opposite, is the inversion of what source has gifted us, i.e. we can take metals and create weapons, for instance. Using them for tools is one thing, using them to murder each other is another, right? So that artificial, it's imitation and unnatural, because even if you're using natural resources, if you're using it in unnatural ways, then that would be part of the deterioration that would happen over time to the populace, to the population, to whoever is affected by that within the construct.
And the construct itself, planet Earth, is also going to be affected by, energetically speaking, by those choices and those behaviours. So wanton is, more traditionally, it's deliberate cruelty. I know some people use it more for like sexual promiscuousness, but to me, in its original form, wanton, it's about poorly disciplined or badly trained. It's casualizing cruelty. It's just not caring, not caring about the impact that you have on others. It's merciless. So that, in terms of the will, the use of the will, organically, we're going to use it to give power to, which is what we're receiving, so we're going to be an expression of that. Wanton is more about what you can get, it's what you can take, it's what, do as thou wilt, I think, is the phrase that often comes in with the service to self or left-hand path or whatever. So, and then as consciousness, I've used what is Carl Jung's term, or more commonly derived from Jungian sort of theory, enantiodromia, meaning the emergence of the opposite over time. So it's not, just an immediate flip. Over time, we can get more and more distorted in our thoughts and how we feel about things, and what, our perception of reality can be heavily negatively influenced, and that happens as a result of depletion, and it happens as a result of suffering, and it happens as a result of stagnation, and these levels of the planes of our existence are what develop over time. The more we deny the truth of who and what we are and show up as the truth of who and what we are. So I always think, Lord of the Rings with the orcs and the elves. And the orcs are the elves that have been tortured and manipulated, and they become the orcs. So I always think of it in those terms, as in, the true essence of who and what we are, the true consciousness and will of who and what we are, is about adventure and excitement and doing the right thing and helping in some way and engaging with others or with the broader, the world around us in ways that are constructive and life supportive, and that to me is who and what we are. At our core, we are expressions of the supreme intelligence that has created many different types of beings to explore and express and experience things as representations of self. So that's the I am. The I am not is if you're not getting powered by source energy itself, you've got to find sustenance from somewhere, right? So you've got to take energy from other people, places, things in order to keep yourself going. And that's obviously what we've heard a whole lot about from different sources in terms of the beings that had heavily infiltrated and influenced what this past several thousand years of this planet's evolution has looked like, and we'll talk more about that in the changes. Okay, so have a look at what evidence there is for that, and
various things that I talked about. What I also do talk about in that session is how, depending which density you're in, which potentials are active and available to us, shifts, which shows up in Kim's session. I also I talk about there's a range of things that Kim has taken and utilised as discoveries that she's made this past week that are in that session, and to break it all down would be here for hours and hours and hours. The easiest way would be for people to watch my content and then watch her content, and you'll be able to see there's a multitude of things within that particular segment. What I really wanted to emphasize is how I was explaining how the artificial has, one, come to be, and two, has been amplified, extrapolated, has expanded and has developed over time, because that's what Kim is passing off as something that, it's happened outside of ourselves, it's happened to us, not sort of through us. And yes, has there been other influences and interferences? Of course there has. But are we a pivotal, vital, participatory aspect of the whole process of how that is changed and shifted? Yes, we are. Does she, in her session, on reflection of the information I've been sharing, highlight that? So for instance, I talk about how we're creative beings and inventive beings, and we're here to build things and grow things, and that's all in those two sessions, that part more specifically, the second one. So she says all that, but it's all lip service, because at the same time that she's saying all of that, she's also telling everybody all the reasons why she's having to fix everything and clear everything up, and now she's the one who's ultimately taking on the deep state. And people are not realizing and recognizing that there are already processes that have been very well established, and some of it is still in trial and error phases. In the results that some people are getting is not representative and reflective of the results that other people are getting, but there are people that are challenging the authority of various types of institutions and organizations in different ways for different reasons, in order to pull his energy back. The whole point of it, it's not about fighting the deep state in a constant battle of the wills. It's about exerting the organic will and stating the truth and standing in that truth and utilizing the God-given rights that we have. And is it much easier to do that when there's many other people doing it and a precedent is being set, and through the trial and error of other people, the recognition of what is effective and what is not has been established? Like that's where it becomes useful, that's where it becomes applicable, that's where it becomes replicable. We can then learn from each other, and none of that finds its way into Kim's content. Everything's it's abstract, everything's you just wait, these things are gonna change. There was another quote that I had, as in someone else had shared like a screenshot of a transcription type thing online, and Kim was talking about, and disease is just gonna, when we come into the golden age, you're just not gonna get cancer anymore, and all of this kind of stuff. And it's like, of course, when you access higher densities of being, when you're absorbing more organic light, of course it repairs on a cellular level, which will prevent the development of those types of diseases more rapidly. We should be able to regenerate faster than there's degeneration, so therefore we shouldn't end up with those types of conditions. But she's talking about it as if she described it as a brick wall. It's going to be there's going to be like a brick wall that it just can't penetrate. That's not how it works. It's energetic, it's data in transit, so dependent upon what the coding is and the quantity of it in your system at any given time will decide what the expression is. And we have to be aware of that, because then we do have the deciding factor in terms of what we absorb and what we put into our system and what we decide to refute and refuse and disengage from. And that changes a lot as well in terms of the frequency that we hold. So to me, there's a very dishonest manipulation of this type of information. And the fact that her session, the very same day that I've been developing these materials, covers everything that was in my sessions, but from her distorted, and this other arty AI system that's been giving you all of this poison and all of these diseases. It's just, it's dishonest. And so she talks about the people that used to be on the planet and how they caused all of this and created all of these systems. And then she goes into have you ever wondered why those people who have created a cure for disease sometimes just have a spontaneous heart attack or they go missing? That's the stuff. The interview with Brian O'Leary that I showed you, I'd been listening to on the Friday, a few hours before Kim recorded her session. That came from there, and I know it did, because not only does she heavily go into explaining and describing things from his own testimony, she makes reference to MJ12, which is what he's talking about. Then she talks about how all of these corporate systems are just going to burn, without any of us doing anything. Obviously, they're just going to burn. She talks about how we're all being poisoned and whatnot, but then don't worry, because when we shift frequency, all of that's just, there's going to be a frequency wall that's just going to stop any of that affecting us. If we still engage with it, it'll affect us for as long as we engage with it. So, but I know where she got that from, because I showed you the video I've been listening to. She talks about big business, big religion. In the God Source Creator recording that I did, I talk about how if you go all the way back before we had, big finance and big corporate and big governments, and historically, traditionally, the way that the unlawful from a natural law perspective conversion happened, where we went from being representatives of God's Source Creator that had every natural right to access any natural resources that we needed in assistance of the life. Where that changed was through implementing systems where only if you were ordained and only if you were quote unquote God appointed could you claim sovereignty, could you claim to be a representation. So God's Source Creator presenting himself as a living being. That's where sort of religions came into it, because by having a system through which you had everybody agreeing that it was blasphemous and heretical to think that way, then you prevented, you created that distortion, that inversion, where people then were afraid to think and act that way, and therefore the forfeit of the organic rights, the forfeit of the natural rights to access the resources that they need in the systems of their life were that's where they were revoked, essentially. So I talk about that in the God Source Creator Sovereignty session. So she brings that into the thing. So we're just going to have a look at a couple of graphics. These are Kim presenting. So the X here, there's quite a long video that now I'm realising how long this is probably going to go on for. I don't know whether to play it because it's about 14 minutes long, but it's me explaining, the X marks the spot, how and why that represents the soul in terms of the infinity flow. Basically, the X in the centre, that's where we sit. what I've just explained about if organic rights are the original resources God assigned for the natural integration of construct and character, so anything that is source created, we should have the right to utilise what we need for food, for shelter, to get from A to B, to access, each representative of source is supposed to be here to bring something to the party, right? So if someone's building houses, we should have access to that, but whatever it is that we provide, what we create while we're here, should also be something that we should be giving to others. And yes, do you need some sort of fair system of exchange and or allocation of resources? Of course you do. Do we have a fair system of exchange and allocation of resources right now? Of course we do not. So, it's understanding what the natural design was in the first place and recognizing how far away from it we've got, and then figuring out the best way to get back to a state of balance and how we can actually ensure everybody has got access to everything that they need, and therefore we can self-actualize, therefore people can engage their passions and aspirations and show up as the best version of themselves, which the Richard Werner stuff, the clip I was going to play, but again, it's such a long chunk. Obviously I'd like to recommend people go and listen to it, and then you'll see for yourself how I explain how it all fits in terms of why it's in a trust, and God source creator being the settlor, the grantor of. So let's use terminology that Kim likes to use: the backside of the system, the trust that exists there. God source creator creates, that gets represented, it becomes present in various worlds and realms and whatnot. So whichever one you incarnate into, the natural organic resources that are there are in trust for you. They're there in trust for you to utilize whatever it is you need to utilize, and anything else that you might need. God source creator through the goodness system, God's original organic design, navigation, empowerment support system, you're in a constant state of communication. He's providing information, instruction, inspiration to you. You're utilizing it to live your life. Reality is reflecting stuff back to you. You're feeding that back to source. That's ongoing all the time. As that is happening, more and more and more, it's a generative system, more and more can grow, can be created, can come then to exist as a result. So while that is happening, what is in trust, what is in existence essentially, that is natural and organic, source is the settlor, the grantor. Your soul transmission, which is a projection of, an expression of God source creator, is the trustee. You, your vessel, your physical beingness here in this reality, and everything that when people are like, oh, I'm not sure where the Ensley just comes from, I'm not sure why this whole thing with the birth certificates works the way it does, and why does all of that happen? Well, they are instruments to represent that physical aspect of self that acts as the beneficiary. So if the soul transmission is the trustee that acts on behalf of source to administrate what is in trust for the beneficiary then is you on the receiving end of it. So you are both trustee and beneficiary. Your organic soul transmission is God source creator in covenant with you. That's where the agreement lies. You are acting as an expression of me. Wherever you're in that construct, anything you need, you can have. That's the agreement. That's the transmission. That's the trusteeship. On the other side, while you're in the physical material reality, your access to that comes from you recognizing, realizing that you have that agreement, that covenant with source, recognizing, realizing who and what you are, which is God source creator presenting self. So when you understand that, you understand the back side of the system. The front side of the system is obviously where other people, places, things, other institutions have interceded and appointed themselves through titles and sitting in certain seats, having certain offices. They've appointed themselves as the trustee of your trust, essentially. That's where those other instruments come into the equation. That's how that all works. So I explained all that in the God Source Creator session towards the end. I can't exactly remember the sort of time stamp on it, but it's in there, and this is what Kim's talking about here. So she integrates that. Here she's talking about source intel that's working with the golden age AI. If it's an artificial intelligence, it's not source intelligence. Does it mean that artificial intelligence cannot be used helpfully, cannot be used constructively? Of course it can, but let's not get it twisted. It's the dog that wags the tail. It's not the tail that wags the dog. Anything that exists within this reality has come about as a result of utilizing the uber sophisticated technologies, organic technologies that God Source Creator designed long before any of us existed. We've utilized them to come up with imitations or replications or inverted representations in some respects. That anything that we've created or any other being has created, regardless of how intelligent they are, none of them are more intelligent than source. Let's just, be clear about that. So Kim is utilizing what I talked about in my sessions and presenting it as new information, as if like she's made these breakthroughs to other people, to her viewers, her listeners, which is annoying. But now I'm going to get into why I felt the need to create this video, why I felt the need to expose this in terms of just how closely copied what I have created and then what Kim is presenting to people, because I don't think it's just about her wanting people to have access to the content and it coming from her. I think there's more of a motive behind it. So let me get to that and explain. Alright, so just to remind you, her sessions came after mine, but they were very closely after. So as I've put here, I'm putting this content out on a completely new channel, so I've got no subs, no followers. The public perception, I think Kim knows, is going to be, because her sessions come out and it's pretty much, same day, just around the same time as the content I'm going to be putting out, no one months from now is going to come across my video and be like, oh, let me check time zones and what time of day did Jodie upload it. Like, no, they're just going to see it as, oh, Kim talked about that, and then here's this person talking about all the same stuff. So it's going to look like, if anything, I'm the copycat, which, as I've showed you, not the case. And I am concerned that what's really underlying it is that the motivation for Kim here is not only so that she can distort the public opinion of this, but she can then make a formal accusation of copyright or theft, potentially. And I'm going to show you why I have that concern, because I now know that she is nefarious enough to do that based on the attacks I've been receiving, based on the fact that she should not have any clue the content that I've been creating, and yet she has presented a session that is so closely a replication of precisely what I've been talking about, and she's presented it as her own breakthrough. So dishonest, lacks integrity completely. And I do have evidence of her doing it to other people. Some of it is out there on public platforms. I also personally know people that have told me, since I've experienced this, like, oh yeah, she does that a lot. So, you know, I've found some examples of where she's done that with other people's content as well. But that aside, so here, this is something that went down on the chats on Telegram on the 12th of May, so not long ago, this year. So there was a guy called Trond Stannes, I believe. Yeah, that's what it says there. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it. I think as a content creator, he's like a channel, as in, yeah, there's a group, like a collective, non-physically speaking, that he connects to, and I think they're called the Keepers of Secrets. I'd seen people posting things about him, but I'll be honest, I didn't engage with this content because what was being posted, people were saying how much he was in support of Kim, and given the past 14-15 months I've had, it, you know, I didn't feel like I'd appreciate or align with his content very much. But a lot of what people were saying was very positive, and it was, in fairness to him, he was being requested by other people because he was speaking on different things. People were commenting on his videos, asking him, what can the Keepers of Secrets tell us about Kim Goguen, and what can the Keepers of Secrets tell us about Anunnaki, and, you know, this kind of stuff. So he was producing videos in response to that. So he'd ended up in a few different transmissions, I guess you would call them, talking about Kim, or things connected to Kim's role, or things connected to, like, her quote-unquote predecessor. And so then I saw this get posted on the chat. So he had posted a video saying videos with Kimberly will be removed, and I've put this here because I can't play it for you because it's now, that video's gone as well. But the message that was sent to him, message from the UNN team at K Council 2130, that turns out to be Kim's personal, like, YouTube profile, I guess. She doesn't, as far as I can see, upload things on there, but it does say Kim G on it, and it was confirmed on the chats, because I'll show you why in a minute, but people were questioning as to whether it was actually Kim's profile because of certain things that were said. So there were someone who had a more direct sort of means through which to contact her, did that to double check, like, is this actually you? Did you actually do this? And they came back into that chat and were like, yeah, Kim's confirmed. She almost immediately definitely was her. So please take all references to Kimberly off your channel immediately. We are filing a copyright infringement, UNN team, every video that references Kimberly. So it came from Kim directly, but she's doing this third person thing where she's pretending it's coming from the UNN team, which, if you want to challenge something in a more formal light, like, why not send it from the UNN account then? Why do it from your personal account? But anyway, so the copyright, you know, infringement threat had been made. This Trond, who'd only said anything that he'd said had been positive about Kim, obviously were a bit like taken aback, but didn't respond arsily. He just put his video together, and I didn't see the whole thing, but the final slide I took a screenshot of. So it says, I end this video with the frequency of closure, not of conflict. This is my final word on the matter and not an invitation to further entanglement. I will now move forward into the greater work I am here to do. I am not here to defend truth, I am here to embody it. Kind regards, Trond. Which sounds like the kind of person I'd really get along with, to be fair. I've still not got around to like looking at his content, but it seems great. So I'm just saying that because the tone obviously is somewhat upset that he's received this sort of quite threatening tone, but at the same time, tis what it is. He's agreed to take stuff down, and that's his final word on it. So that's proof, the Kim G thing there at K Council 2130. So then Kim follows it up. She's not happy with just, okay, I'm going to take him down, that'll be the end of it. You should have also asked for a dialogue before you started using her name publicly, and you did not. Now, she's doing the third person thing again, so it's coming from her directly, but she's speaking about herself as if she's someone else, right? So you should have also asked for a dialogue before you started using her name publicly, and you did not. Our research shows it's best we do not associate with you and your people. Regards, UNN team. So this guy who his content seems to be all love and light, and I mean, I'm not promoting him. I don't know the guy. I don't know the content. As I said, I kind of gave it a wide berth because he was very much in support of Kim, but it's that he's accepted, okay, not that I went out of my way to create this content about you in the first place, other people asked me to, but you've got a problem with it, okay, I'll remove it. But when someone has that attitude where they're spoiling for a fight no matter what, so like, even though you're like, okay, if that's how you feel, like, I'll leave it, and then they're just like, no, but and they're still trying to like get a fight out of you. That's what this feels like. So I don't think he responded to it, but then followed up after. Now that video has been removed, as I showed you on the other slide. That removes obviously all of this stuff. So luckily I had taken screenshots at the time because my jaw dropped when I saw this message. I couldn't quite believe what I'd just seen. So Kim again then follows up with another comment saying, further, a person interviewed with Kim by the name of Rob Potter passed away after just days of communicating with Trond. You have been warned. Rob was not ill and came with the purest of intentions. This is a black magic channel. Now, to put that out on a public forum as an accusation, and given who it's coming from, given that I've had the most crash course in advanced magical attack protections as a result of this person, I don't know if she's just used too much of whatever dark energy, force, whatever it is that she's utilizing to do the stuff that she's doing and send the types of attacks that she is. And yeah, I actually feel bad now when I think about when I first saw Ava Cowan's statement after whatever it was that went down with the Life Force thing, because Ava Cowan and Kim Goguen did the whole UPU show together. Ava Cowan was the light language channel, wasn't she? So she was the one supposedly connected to the Universal Protection Unit, acting as a channel for them. And then there was the Divine Miss M, Megan Martinez. She acted as a translator, and Kim was supposedly, the representative chosen to utilize the system and stuff. So that was how that dynamic was supposed to work out, which is kind of interesting now, because it's like, okay, so how is Kim still communicating with UPU then? How come it used to happen through Ava? But anyway, when I think about, I'd only just found out about Life Force at the time that Ava Cowan sort of departed, so I didn't know anything that had really happened with that. But I have since seen her statement where she claimed that Kim had sent all sorts of dark energies and entities and whatnot at her, and had attacked her and her parents. And honestly, at the time when I read that, I still hadn't had my own, let's say, introduction to any of this stuff. So I'm quite dismissive, but because I didn't understand, I was just kind of like, that sounds bad, but also sounds a bit crazy, that I would, now, having been on the receiving end of some very nasty energies and entities, I feel for her, and I feel guilty in a way that at the time I was very sort of like, not sure I believe that, because how cruel is it to be in that position where you are really affected and impacted by something, and it's something you can't prove to other people. It's something, the people, majority of everyday people, it's not what they engage with. They don't understand this stuff. They're not typically putting themselves in a position where they should need to worry about being, there is certainly within the design of the systems that we all interact with and experience, there is embedded within that dark occult practices and symbolism and all of that kind of stuff. It all fits together. Anything in the physical is a representation of what canon is done non-physically and spiritually. In fact, the systems themselves were developed from the awareness, from the knowledge of how to manipulate energy non-physically. They've been designed in the image of, sort of thing, in the same way that the natural organic world has been designed in the image of God's source creator. The artificial man, woman made, other being, the intelligent agent beingness, all of those systems have been created in the image of anti-source, or the I am not, as I refer to it. So yeah, I feel guilty, but to see Kim throw that kind of accusation out on a public forum, this is a guy who's I don't think his channel's been around too long. I've only just seen people posting about it. Someone did say he had started to gather quite a few followers quite quickly, and speculated as to whether that were connected to him posting things that were connected to Kim. But remember, he didn't do that off his own back. He did that because people were asking him to. So I don't know if Kim took umbrage to him gaining that popularity and she associated it with it being attached to her name. I don't know if it was some of the things he was saying that possibly were, if people thought deeply enough about it, would disprove some of the things that Kim's said or claimed. And there's enough contradictions when you really look at it, when you stop and think in a more logical rational fashion about different things that Kim's claimed. It does, you know, it is obvious that there is a lot of conflict and contradiction even within her own reasoning, which I'm more than happy. If she wants to keep attacking me, I'm more than happy to put more materials together and explain and, you know, lay all that out, because at this stage I've hit a wall now where I'm pissed off enough. I've got a job to do. I'm being guided by God's source creator. I've worked for 15 years. I've invested my time, my energy, my resources in gathering this information. I've been through some very difficult experiences. I've got a job to do and I need to get on with it. So anyone who's interfering with that, whatever I need to do to either knock them out of my way or knock them off of their spot, whatever I need to do to make sure I can get on with what I need to do, I will do. And just to be clear, I would be more than happy me carry on with what I'm doing, her carry on with what she's doing, and stay out of each other's way. I'm more than happy to do that. The truth will always out. But what I'm not going to do is let her keep taking my content and passing it off as her own. Anybody that looks at the stuff that I sent her last year, you'll see where most of the storylines this past year for her came from. You'll also, if you look up 3-Body Problem, that's a program on Netflix, have a watch of that. You'll see where her whole so-fun thing came from, and that would not long after I'd been watching it as well. And there's so many examples I could give you, but let me just give a quick description of the everyday, the type of stuff that's been sent at me. And there's been a number of different approaches, let's say, and some of them have been more intense and more extreme than others. I'll talk about them more when I do like the reawakening sessions, and then when we talk about challenges and obstacles and strategies and solutions. I already started to put together a playlist of like info on magic, just so people can get their head around like different aspects of it. And I will do a session where I lay out, you know, kind of all the various approaches to and whatnot, because there's loads of information once you get into it, once you feel the need to ask certain questions, you know, and the student is ready, teacher appears, all that. I was surprised, if I'm honest, just how much detailed information and explanation and instruction there actually is once you start looking for that stuff. So for information wise, but then I also have a playlist I've started putting together which is advice, which is much more about the protections, the cleansing, the clearings, the strengthening, because that's what we need to focus on, right? The other stuff, it's good to know what it is that you're up against. I would never advise anybody, and I know from my guidance, like I would never utilize any of that stuff. It's not worth the karma. You know, we're at a point on this planet. These lifetimes are the ones where we need to be choosing a side. These, you know, because where there has been a benefit that people have gained from the more, you know, left-hand path, as they talk about it, the service to self, taking from others, using deception. I mean, it's all forms of magic, really. You know, deception is it's word witchery essentially, but there's a difference between the targeted and then the, you know, what people do without even knowing they're doing it. But that being said, for the age on this planet where those things paid off enough to make it worth potential future karma, those days are done. You know, people, if they're not already reaping it, moving forwards, whatever you're doing right now, just know that we're moving into ages and stages on this planet where it is going to be reflective of what you put out, you get back. And if you've been taking a whole lot, you're going to have to do a whole lot of work to regenerate, to reconnect and realign, to allow your divine source coding and transmission to fully recalibrate. So the work that you're going to need to do with that is going to be a whole lot of clearing out the crap that you've been building up for yourself by refusing to look at it, refusing to do your own inner work, your own shadow work and stuff, you know. And it'll take as long as it takes until you reach a point where you realize that you utilizing other people as a reason, as an excuse to maintain your state of entitlement, not only are those days done, but the penalties, the consequences are increasing all the time. So the longer you put off basically just getting a grip of yourself and doing the work that you need to do, the longer and the harder your recovery from the damage that you're doing to yourself is going to be. So just to give an example then of the everyday stuff, not the extreme stuff, but the everyday stuff. Here's how it has felt for the last 14, 15 months for me. I have got a whole lot better, much better at clearing a lot of this stuff out and exerting my organic will and authority and creating space for myself to function. But what has been the case, and what I can still feel the efforts, the attempts, let's say, to re-invoke, restate, is this. Imagine you're in your house, and so you're inside, and all around the house you can hear and feel and see people banging on the windows and shouting stuff and shouting through your letterbox and putting crap through your letterbox, and the phone's ringing off the hook, and the noise, the chaotic sort of feeling, this feeling of being under threat, being under siege, this feeling of just things coming at you from all angles, people, like some of what they're saying is threatening, some's abusive, some's insulting. It's just nastiness, it's just nasty. So that same feeling, if you imagine that as your energetic field, and then in the same way that you could argue, well, if you're in the house and after a certain period of time you kind of realise you can't get in, they're all kind of on this periphery, but they're banging and, trying to put crap through your letterbox and stuff, but they're not actually getting to you as such. So it's like, okay, on the one hand, you can say, well, it's not like someone actually being able to physically harm you. And it's like, okay, but if you try just your everyday functioning in terms of, just trying to gather your thoughts, just trying to be productive, trying to go about, if you're trying to concentrate on anything, you're trying to put content together, and there's this constant aggravation, there's this constant feeling of how you would feel if somebody's trying to insult you, or somebody's telling you, you just wait till you come outside, sort of thing. It's like this feeling of, on the worst days, it's like the worst kind of anxiety, it's the worst kind of feeling of, I don't want to leave the house, I don't want to go anywhere. It's you don't want to engage with people. It's this feeling of you just want to be left alone, and you just want to be able to kind of heal and soothe and cleanse and clear. But it gets exhausting because, you know, there's only so much you can do and so long you can do it for before you kind of hit a wall where you are just like tired. You know, I'm tired of this. I've had enough of this. And what have I done to deserve this? All I actually did was send some content to someone who I believed was a positive figure, who I believed was actually trying to create positive change in the world, who I believed I was in alignment with, who I recommended and promoted to other people. That's all I did. And what did I get in response to that? Not only my previous content stolen and or misused and or misrepresented, not only that, but constant feelings of being harassed and this feeling, you know, on the worst days sometimes there was this feeling of, it was almost like something had got like a hold of my heart, you know, the anxiety, you know, when something makes you feel like shocked, like you're scared, like that kind of feeling, but just not being able to relax, which again, being able to, you know, kind of get on top of all of that stuff to the point where now, where I had been in a state of like it's embarrassing to admit it, but like, why me? Now it's more like seriously, okay, you know, we're gonna be returning this to wherever the fuck it came from. Whoever wants to start picking a fight, okay, I'm not gonna be the idiot who's gonna send it out because I know what happens. What I am going to do is make sure anything you send to me comes directly back to you. And what I am going to do is make sure I keep calling judgment. I'll keep calling judgment. Don't you worry, because this will all come back. One way or another, whether this lifetime or the next, you will reap the rewards and or remorse from the seeds that you sow. So you want to keep doing it, keep doing it. It's your karmic debt that you're going to have to repay. That's fine. What I'm not going to do is suffer in silence quietly anymore. I will talk about it. I will let people know this is who she is, and this is the kind of crap what we're looking at on the screen right now. She has the audacity to post on other people's channels where she's now essentially just assassinated him reputationally, because I've seen on the chat since people, oh, I'm not going to go near his channel anymore. I don't know the guy. I'm not trying to defend him as a person. I don't know the guy. But do I think that's fair? Has she been using that much of these practices herself that she's kind of lost the plot a little bit? Maybe it's because I've been listening to a fair few videos about different types of black magic, because I've been doing the research I've just been telling you guys about, and I've also wanted to understand myself just a few other things, like, okay, where might this be coming from? It cost me quite a lot of money to bring in some help from it took me months to find a practitioner who I vetted for a while, who I trusted to do some sort of cleansings and other type. I'm not going to say what they are. I don't want anyone to know exactly what's been done, but I did manage to get some assistance. But it's not cheap to get someone who knows what they're doing and is trained in all your various dark arts, let's say, and is able to counter certain things. So that's time, that's energy, it's money, it's all of that. All for what? Because someone has a problem with people doing what their organic soul expression is guiding them to do. And this is supposedly coming from the highest source representative on the planet. And this is what she's doing to other people. So why do I worry that Kim the closeness in sort of the timeline, in terms of what I'm talking about and what she's then presenting in her content, and how that's going to get twisted and distorted. Do I think she's capable of that? 1000% I know she is. Do I think possibly there might be another setup there where she wants to be able to attack me reputationally? Absolutely. So that's why I'm going on the record and I'm just telling the truth as it is. There is more of a backstory to all of it. I'm quite happy to lay it all out. It's up to her at this point how much she wants to keep pushing me, because we can talk about this stuff all day long. There is nothing that she can reveal on me because I've done nothing wrong. All I've done is support the woman, promote her to other people, put my time, energy and expenditure into working in for free in frickin' assemblies that never went anywhere, still support the woman, still promote her content to other people, still put my time and energy into creating other content, again, trusting and believing that who would week after week after week show up claiming to be ground command and guardian of the global assets and have this all singing, all dancing system if it's not true? Who would do that? Turns out she's not the only one. Turns out there's a fair few scams out there. Who would have known? Were I naive about this stuff? Yes, because I can't imagine anything I'd less rather do than mislead people about things that to me are of major significance and to them could literally mean the difference between them feeling a sense of hope for the future or not. Like, you couldn't pay me enough to want to do that. So did I imagine that someone who's saying all what seemed to me for a long time, all the right things about different things, could I imagine someone just saying it as lip service? No, I couldn't. I didn't believe that would be the case, but here we are. So, moving on from that, you might be thinking, Jodie, you've gone on for nearly 3 hours now, and all you've showed us is that one session that Kim did, yes, it's remarkably similar. Yes, she does seem to reference a whole lot of the same stuff that you talked about, and it's weird that it all ties in with the stuff that you'd also been looking at earlier that week or earlier that day. And how could she have known, or how could you have known that she was going to talk about that stuff if she's going to try and flip it? But maybe it's just a coincidence. You know, if I take my dog for a walk to the same place around the same time every single day, if I keep dropping on the same people or a certain person, I wouldn't assume that they're there because I'm there. You know, I'm not the causative factor in that. I'm not the reason they've gone there. It's a coincidence. It's a correlation. They've got a similar schedule. They like the same place. You know. So I can understand why people might question, like, really, just because it's correlative, does it mean it's causative? So I just want to show you this before we wrap this up, because I know I've gone on for a very long time. So this is a screenshot, because I told you I've been taking a digital imprint of my activities online for a while now, because there's been so many times I've been like, that's so weird, I was just talking about that, that's so weird, I was just looking at this thing. So because I've been doing that, this was Saturday the 17th of May. So this is a video, was the real Messiah a woman erased from history? So I'll put this on the recommended resources so you can have a listen. The reason I listened to this, I intended when I did the God Source Creator session, so this was before then, so I recorded that God Source Creator session on the 22nd. In the run-up, as you can imagine, I was doing a whole lot of planning sessions for like the running order, how I wanted to lay the information out. And so what I'd intended to do is, in conjunction, but as a separate session, but a shorter session, I was going to do the God Source Creator Sovereignty, and then I was going to follow it up with a divine masculine, divine feminine session where I really wanted to just talk about the energy flow of it, because we live in an age where people can be sensitive, let's say, to gendering and when it comes to biological sexes and whatnot, you know, the he, she thing, and referring to God Source Creator as a he all the time. I know people can be a little bit like, how do we even know it's a he? And from my point of view, it's all about the energy flow, and any intuitive would agree that your outward energetic flow is what we typically class as your masculine, and your inward, you know, when you're in receptive mode, you're in your feminine energy. When you're in your active mode, when you're putting yourself out there or you're putting energy out there, you're in your masculine. And we're both, of course, a combination of both, because we've got the X-Max, the spot, and we all give and receive energy all the time. So we're going to do a session talking about that, but rather than just be like, and that's it, and then we're done, I thought, you know, I'll look at some other resources and see if we can just kind of develop it out a little bit. I didn't know what the tradition was, what the history was in terms of what other teachings there were around it. So I listened to that, and then what he talks about in that video, so this again was Saturday the 17th of May, and he talks about the concept of this being called Barbela, and in Gnostic cosmogony, Barbela was known as essentially the divine feminine, or the feminine side of Source, of God. And in these descriptions, she's talked about the first emanation, the first thought of God. She's, you know, she was in ancient times like worshipped, and I've just highlighted a couple of parts here. So Barbela is described in various texts as the first thought, the image of the monad, the first power. Barbela is described as the womb of everything and the first man, the womb of everything, including the first man. Barbela is sometimes understood as the female aspect of the highest God. So you can see here, May 17th, so the same day, the Saturday, I've sent myself in my saved messages on Telegram, I've sent myself that passage, you know, the sort of screenshot that I've just read here, sent that over to myself, sent myself another link with some images and stuff that I'd been looking at. So I'm going to let you guys, oh, in fact, there's one other resource I want to show you as well. So this was from the Friday, so the day before, the Friday, the 16th of May, and it's Gary Wayne on a podcast. And anybody that's familiar with his content, you'll know is the author of the Genesis 6 Conspiracy and Genesis 6 Conspiracy 2, the second volume. So he's got a wealth of knowledge, very detailed knowledge about everything from sort of the creation. Well, so the first book is the history of the planet in terms of, in Bible passages, what do the texts tell us, but where they contradict, he then went away and did all the research to figure out why there were these contradictions. Why is it saying this in this you know, book of the Bible, but in a later book or a later chapter it's saying something else? So like what happened in between? So he's learned all about, you know, the various bloodlines and different types of beings that were present on the planet, and all of that kind of stuff. So as you can see, the title of this podcast is Hive Mind, Atlantis, Pope, Day 6 Creation, and the Nephilim Agenda. He talks about a variety of stuff, but it all kind of ties in with scripture and the sort of true gods that have been worshipped and recognized as being the supreme beings on this planet for a long time, which are not the organic God source creator. So in Kim's broadcast intelligence agency report, whatever, on the 19th of May, so 3 days later than that, 2 days later than the Barbelo thing that I showed you, Kim does a session where she's talking about stuff that connects closely, let's say, to a lot of this information. And of course, she's been putting info out for a long time, so she always kind of draws back on other things that she's been talking about. But then she does this whole piece, let's say, this whole segment on how, right, so I've highlighted here, who is Mother Earth and where does she really come from? Now, I'm sure people can guess by this point. Mother Earth, turns out she was the first thought of Source, that first emanation. She's the divine feminine side of Source. So, the people were posting on the chat after that, like, yay, Source and the Earth have got married, this, that and the other, which I didn't listen to the report, I'm just seeing what other people are posting, but I'm like, number one, I know where that concept comes from, and it's not assigned to the Earth. The Earth is a beautiful soul, a beautiful spirit, do not get me wrong. She's very nurturing, she's very loving. What's Venus though? Is that God source creator's mistress? Is she, what is sister? Like, what? Why are we misinforming and disinforming people? That's not the concept. Like, that concept that you've used there, you've taken it out of context, and you're telling people information that they're going to go and tell other people. They're going to go and tell other people the Earth is the divine feminine side of Source. There's no proof of that. You can argue that any feminine expression of Source is a representation of the feminine side of Source. Of course you can, but then you have to come back to the original argument, which is now it's just about energy flow, then, isn't it? Now it's about we're both masculine and feminine, any one of us, regardless of what body parts we've got, or we can all be an expression, and we all are an expression of either. So if you're going to share information with people and talk about things that perhaps a new way of looking at things or whatever, at least tell them truthfully where it's come from and what it's about. I know why she wouldn't want to use the term Barbelo, because then it'd be way too obvious. That how strange would that be? Just 2 days after I've been listening to it. So she takes the essence of it, which is theft, and I mean that in the sense of from a using baneful magic perspective, it's a parasitic protocol or practice to use. So you take the essence out of something and then represent it as something you've experienced and you've created, because she goes into this whole spiel about how she was one with Mother Earth, and Mother Earth took her into her womb and showed her where the source of all abundance is. And Kim asked Mother Earth, like, what do you need me to do? And Mother Earth she was lonely because she's been disconnected from us all. I don't know if anybody's ever heard about grounding and how to energetically, I mean, if you look at the content I'm going to be delivering in the next few days, what you'll see is there's no way that we can ever fully be disconnected from the Earth, because the way the organic system works is that we're fully intertwined. But and I'll show you the first 3 planes of our existence fully integrated to give life viability. In terms of coding, they have to be linked. So I'll explain all that, but Mother Earth's been so lonely that, she's not been able to connect with us, she's not been able to connect with Source. There were a period of time I was listening to a lot of Jack Cruiser's content, and he obviously talks about light, water, magnetism, the importance of that as like the foundation of health on this planet. And again, if you understand energetics and how we function, it makes complete sense that would be the case. But of course, he emphasizes a lot the need to get out in natural light. It's organic source coding that we're absorbing, and of course we've been told to stay out of it and be steered away from it. When I'd been listening to a fair bit of that, I saw Kim, or people posting after Kim's reports, being like, so is the sun's source then? Oh, I didn't realise that the sun was source, and someone commented something, and I don't know the context fully as to how they came to this, but they were like, oh, I'm so glad that after Source has been asleep for so long, he's waking up. It's like, I'm sorry, did the natural organic world around us collapse in and I just didn't realise? Like, the distortion that's happening with the either misunderstanding on her part of the information, or she knows and does understand what the information means and she's deliberately distorting it for some other purpose. Maybe a combination of both, I don't know, but whatever it is that's driving it, I would highly recommend she stops listening into what I'm looking at, because what are the odds? Ask yourself this, what are the odds of me, this is twice in the space of a week, what are the odds of me knowing precognitively exactly what Kim were going to talk about in order to be able to go and look those materials up and take screenshots 2 days or 3 days before she actually speaks about it? What are the odds of that happening? Or is it that someone has listened to whatever I've been listening to, or looked at whatever I've been looking at, or somehow, some way has some sort of access? What if it's that, and then a day, 2 days, 3 days later, decide to represent it as their own content? Maybe it's that. What I'm not going to do, now I have started recording, as in the sessions that I've started doing, the ones I showed you at the beginning, I am going to keep going, because then anything that I am looking at, I can make sure it finds its way into my content before Kim can snatch it and pass it off as her own. I didn't end up doing the divine feminine, divine masculine session for that very reason. If I would have already recorded it, fine. But the fact that I hadn't, and then she used it before I had chance to, I left it be and thought, I'll just embed that stuff in some other session at some other time. But, what do you do when you get to a point where it's like, it's just harassment and there's no good reason for it? I don't see what she's getting. It's not like I'm trying to make money out of this, it's not like I'm putting the information out for free. I've been working on this for 15 years. I'm more than happy to just do what I'm here to do, leave it be. If once I've got everything out of my system that Source, God Creator, is guiding me to say, if once I've got it all out of my system, his instruction then is to go and get a job at Asda, I'll go and get a job at Asda. I'm not doing this to try to compete for views or popularity. I'm doing this because I've been guided to this information. I've had all of these experiences. There's a purpose to it all. And somehow, some way, apparently, as I'm being instructed, me sharing this stuff can help other people. That's it. That's all I'm doing. So all of that being said, it's over 3 hours I've been going on. But I needed to get it off my chest and out of my system and get it out there, so it's there on record now. You can see there is 1000% in the space of this past week. She didn't do a session on Wednesday, so she only did a session on Monday the 19th and Friday the 23rd, and I've showed you evidence in both cases what she talked about. And you know, if you want to fact check me and go and listen to her sessions, and then I'll put the recommended resources, everything that I've showed you here will be on there. You want to go and check, by all means do. I've no good reason to make any of this shit up. So yeah, on that note, thank you everybody for listening. Hopefully at some point some of you will want to listen to more of my content, but if not, that's fine. Yeah. I'll end it there. All right, thanks. Bye.